it is time for me to start on the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Well, Alphonse Daudet was writing during the time of the Franco-Prussian War. He experienced as a child what happens as a result of war, and he feels the loss of his country, and he feels the loss of his identity. As a result of this, he thought that he should write about it and make people aware of the cause for such things happening in our lives. Now, he says, I started for school very late that morning and was in a great dread of Sir scolding, especially because M. Hamel had said that he would question us on participles. Now he has been given a homework, and that is he should get ready to be able to tell without looking or without making a single mistake the law of the participle, which was part of language learning in those days. When you're learning language in those days, you need to learn the grammar, and that is they'll give you a statement about what a particular part of speech is, and you'll have to learn it up by heart and be able to repeat it word by word without making a single mistake. Now, his task, and I probably think that it is the whole class's task, is to learn this definition thoroughly and be ready to be interrogated on it. Now, he says he hasn't learned anything about it, and therefore he was not ready to go to school. And on top of that, he started out to school very late. Now, when you've started out to school very late, there is a special punishment for that. And added to that, he has not completed his homework and is not ready for the class. So the desire for him is not to go to school. The desire for him is to cut class and enjoy himself by going into the woods and playing in the river or watching something which is very interesting compared to actually going to class and getting punished for all the things that he had done wrong or not done. For a moment I thought of running away, he writes, and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles. He gives a reason why he hadn't the desire to go to school. But I had the strength to resist. So something told him that he has to resist that temptation to cut class and go to school. They said I had the strength to not follow according to my temptations and hurried off to school. When I passed down the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. The lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer, and I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? Now, as he was going to school, he saw a crowd of people standing in front of the community hall, something equivalent to the community hall, and looking at the notice board, all in a crowd, reading some notice on the notice board. And he knew that there must be something bad written there, some bad news, because Alsace-Lorraine had fallen into the hands of the Prussians and it is no longer part of France. And as the days passed, the commanding officer uh, under whom they are now citizens is now issuing um, order after order, and there is the mention of draft. Probably it is something connected to what the Prussians used to do. They used to ask everyone who is 17 and above, 17 to 20, to join the Prussian army, and probably it is that they are reading, but he doesn't know what it is. Some bad news. They've already been defeated. There are defeat after defeat. Each one comes up on the notice board, and now he doesn't know what it is, and he does not have the time because he's decided to go to school and to reach there at the earliest moment. So He does not listen to his curiosity to find out what it is and rushes on. And probably something made one of the observers who was reading the notice to stop him and tell him, don't hurry up, as you see in the next paragraph. Then, as I hurried by as fast as I could, the blacksmith, and his name is Watcher, who was there with his apprentice, reading the bulletin, reading the notice. This bulletin means notice. Called after me, don't go so fast, Bub. Bub is probably referring to some term of endearment, my child, something like that. You'll get to your school in plenty of time. Probably is telling him, don't hurry. And he says there will be a lot of time. Whenever you reach there, there will be a lot of time. The boy at that time has not the patience to really understand the words that have been being spoken to him. So he hurries on. I thought he was making fun of me. The only thing that made him that he thought was happening was maybe the watcher is making fun of me. Probably the watcher, being a blacksmith, um, is one of the persons to whom people of this boy's age generally um, go in order to get jobs. Now we'll find out later on in the lesson, people of Alsace-Lorraine were not very particular about education. And that is the reason why Alphonse Daudet has written this lesson. He thinks that people are not giving enough importance to education, and they think that it is more important that the children, instead of going to school, should go to work. And Watchtower was one person who benefited from it. He used to get a lot of people who used to be his apprentices, and probably now he is teasing him, saying, "Now I think you shouldn't be going to school." Probably he's been throwing barbs like this at this boy because he goes to school, even though his helper, his apprentice, is about the age probably of the person who is now going to school, and is not going to school. He's working under him. So probably he thought he's one of those jokes, or let's say teasing, that bullying that is going on. I thought he was making fun of me, and he reached in Hammel's little garden all out of breath, completely panting. Usually, when school began, he says, there was a scene usually when the school began. There was a great bustle, and the scene was everybody was in a hurry. There was a lot of noise, there was a lot of confusion, and he explains that confusion, which could be heard out in the street. You could hear the sound of all these things happening out there in the street. And he describes the things that caused all the noise, the opening and the closing of desks. Probably they had a desk where you could store things. If you open it, maybe it opened upward, and you could deposit your books in there and then close it. Usually these children don't really patiently close it, they just drop it, and probably that is the sound, that is the reason why there was such a lot of sound. um, Lessons repeated in unison, another source of noise. Every child together with other children of their group was repeating loudly. If you see later on in the lesson, towards the end of the lesson, when you actually see the lesson in action, that there are a lot of children screaming at the top of their voice, telling the alphabet. So this is one kind of drill that usually goes on in the class, in the school, and usually at this time when the school is supposed to have started, this sound is supposed to be heard very loudly, and this time that sound was not heard, and he was a little worried what was happening. He was probably wondering, why don't I hear those sounds very loudly? See, look at the way it is being described. The opening and closing of desks, that's one part. The next part, lessons repeated in unison, very loud. What was very loud? The lessons repeated in unison with our hands over our ears. Holding the hands over the ears, probably to make sure that the sound of the others does not disturb the concentration that you have in what you are trying to listen to or what you are trying to say. Maybe as a child he himself had to repeat something and maybe he couldn't hear if he did not cover his ears like that in order to hear his own voice clearly. Or probably this helped to channel the sound of the voice of the teacher towards his ear. With our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. This is another kind of sound that was there in the school at that time. But now it was all so still. Instead of all this sound, there is a great silence. There is a great lack of movement. Everything seemed very quiet. There's only one time he remembered when school is generally this quiet, and that is a Sunday, and he describes that. But now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion, I had depended on the commotion to get to my desk. He had got a strategy to reach his desk without any notice in case he comes late. And that is, uh, everybody will be making a lot of noise, there will be a lot of movement, and anyone entering will not be noticed. To get to my desk without being seen, but of course, that day, everything had to be as quiet as Sunday morning. Through the window, I saw my classmates already in their places. He says, I saw that they were sitting there and they were not making any noise. And M. Hamel walking up and down. The teacher himself was walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler. Probably this is the implement that he had probably used in order to punish the children in case they make a lot of noise. Terrible iron ruler under his arm, and I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was, horrified, because everybody was so silent that he'll be surely caught. But nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, go to your place quickly, little Franz. You know, here the name of the little boy is Franz. Rhymes with France. So probably the author is trying to say that this was the state of people of France at that time. This I'll explain to you a little later. Under his arm, I opened the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. Nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you. I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then did I see that our teacher was wearing his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap all embroidered that he never wore except uh, on inspection and prize days. Besides, not only that, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. Something had changed in the teacher, and not only that, something has changed in the school itself. It's all so silent. The teacher was wearing his best dress, his Sunday best. Already it looked and felt like a Sunday, and the teacher was wearing his best clothes. He usually wears his Sunday's best when there is an occasion, a special occasion in the school. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. What really put him into a little more confusion than what he was already experiencing is the fact that there were other people sitting inside this classroom. Now, as you go on through the lesson, you'll find out that it is a one room school, meaning that was one classroom, and all the students of all the classes had their lessons there, and there was only one teacher. He was taking turns teaching all the lessons to the different groups of students. And in the back benches, which were usually empty, the whole school was one room, and even then, the last benches were almost always empty, and there was people sitting there, surprisingly. The village people sitting there quietly.